Uganda is walking a tightrope as it seeks to avoid careening towards the cliff of a global blacklist for money laundering and terrorism financing. As the deadline, which is barely in a month's time, nears, the country must address 16 issues if it's to escape the sanctions of the Financial Action Task Force and Intergovernmental Money Laundering and Terrorism Financing Watchdog. In 2020, Uganda was placed on the grey list of the global agency. Countries under the grey list have deficiencies in their regimes to counter money laundering, terrorist financing, and proliferation financing. Any country that appears on the grey list, including Uganda and 22 other countries, is automatically placed on the blacklist of the European Union and United Kingdom. This means transactions originating from Uganda or made through Uganda's financial system and cash from or to the country face more scrutiny by the international systems, which leads to delays in concluding business transactions.
We have a strong team for any question.
Addressing a news conference on Thursday, the Executive Director of Financial Intelligence Authority, Sydney Asubo, revealed that the country will likely meet the demands of the watchdog and be removed from the grey list.
The FATF monitors different countries to ensure that they implement these standards fully and effectively, and holds countries that do not comply to account. It is on this basis that countries submit to what we call periodic mutual evaluations. An assessment or an evaluation is done to determine how the country is compliant with the two categories. There's what we call effectiveness. In other words, first of all, do you have the laws required to fight? For example, they will ask you, do you have laws against money laundering? You say yes. Do you have laws against terrorism financing? You say yes. And then the second issue is to determine how effectively do you apply. That's why they ask questions like how many convictions do you have, how many prosecutions, how much money have you confiscated from criminals, things like that, to test effectiveness. So when Uganda was assessed in 2016, a number of issues were identified.
If Uganda fails to comply with the requirements and is dismally assessed further, it could slip into the blacklist, which currently has Iran and North Korea. The dire consequences of blacklisting could bring the banking sector to a shuddering halt.
I've said it's a communication to the world that there are some issues that have been identified and they're being addressed. So that anyone who is making a decision, for example, to invest, is aware of this fact. Now, the biggest problem will be if you don't address the issues on the grey list. When you're on the grey list, then the risk is you move to the blacklist. That means that's why we're working very hard to ensure that we remain on the grey list until we've addressed all the issues. But the consequence of a blacklist will be that this will obviously negatively affect the ability of our financial institutions to conduct international financial transactions and international business in general. Commercial banks' foreign operations will be crippled by the sanctions that will, among other things, prohibit other foreign financial institutions from dealing with our financial institutions, which will be accommodative and all supportive of money laundering. So this could affect the receipt of our export earnings.
Asubo says there are 5 sectors, including gambling, real estate, the legal profession, accounting firms, and the minerals sector, that have been placed under the microscope. With the country firmly placed in the crosshairs, there are fears that authorities are not doing enough supervision.
The greed, I don't want to call it even the desire, the greed to attract foreign direct investment here, it tends to overshoot other considerations. I mean, we have had so many times politicians tell us, do not disturb my investors. I think that's not the way to operate. Not everyone who has money should be here to invest. Briefcase companies operate that way. Someone who has no track record, or has a bad track record, then you make it easy for them to just establish themselves and do business here. 2 years down the road, no business at all. In fact, I want to applaud the Bank of Uganda for having a very strong supervisory department to have been able to manage this. But all said and done, I have always advised, and this is out of my own conviction, that as Uganda we need what we call a fiscal committee or investment committee, whatever you call it, wherein all these people who are concerned with investment are party.
On Thursday this week, Bank of Uganda announced that Afriland Bank has asked to voluntarily exit Uganda just slightly over 2 years after it was granted a license in September 2019. The bank, according to details with the central bank, has not administered any credit or loans in the 16 months it has been in Uganda. While announcing the exit, Bank of Uganda's acting governor said Afriland's decision for voluntary liquidation was an outcome of strategic business review by the shareholders Afriland Group. The central bank said on Wednesday it approved the request from Afriland to apply to the High Court for voluntary liquidation. Afriland formally started its operations on December 1, 2020, about 3 months before the economy was locked down due to COVID-19.
To understand what the implication is, see, by the time we issued, like the Deputy Governor indicated, by the time we gave them the approval to proceed with court, there are a number of things we have done. One, we have determined it's solvent. Two, we have conducted what's called a regulatory impact assessment to determine what the impact of this exit is on the wider financial sector. And the impact is little to minimal. Okay? And in any case, we have the necessary mechanisms and regulatory toolkits to manage any adverse impact of an exit.
But the rules that apply to banks apply to the customers of the banks. So these are intended for transactions done through the banks for their customers. So those are the transactions we focus on for the customers. The transactions that the banks do between themselves as business, or either between themselves or on the behalf of the banks as on their own behalf, are expressly excluded from the application of these rules, because the oversight is supposed to be provided by the central bank.
From the information we have, because otherwise we'd never have licensed them, because every applicant is run against in the UN sanctions list. That was never the case. At the time they had the application, yes, there was a suspicion, but that was verified as not true. Okay? So, Afriland Bank is not because it was undercapitalized. The decision to exit is not because it was undercapitalized based on their financials.
Probably we are more accustomed to retail kind of banking. I'm not excusing banking supervision arm of the central bank. Probably now they need to dig deeper. That some people will come under the coat of providing this kind of product, yet they are actually money laundering.
But the bank, whose shareholders are currently locked in a row which is before the High Court, does not have a squeaky clean image across its continental operations. In the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo, two Kinshasa auditors at the bank exposed the underhand methods. They leaked thousands of documents showing the bank's ties to sanctioned Israeli businessman Dan Gatla, who was a close friend of the former DRC president, Joseph Kabila. DRC estimates that it may have lost nearly $4 billion as a result of dubious mining and oil contracts signed with Gatla, a coalition of NGOs estimated. In March 2021, the United States reinstated sanctions against the billionaire decided in December 2017 by the U.S. State Department, but which had been eased just before President Donald Trump left the White House. Washington accused him of causing the DRC to lose $1.36 billion in tax revenue in the 2010s. The two auditors have since fled to Europe after expressing fear for their lives, taking with them a trove of documents. They were sentenced to death in their absentia. Part of these documents show an elaborate scheme of how firms linked to Gatla were able to circumvent sanctions imposed on him by the United States. The US Treasury had accused Gatla of amassing his fortune through hundreds of millions of dollars worth of opaque and corrupt mining and oil deals in Congo. The revelations came a month after it emerged that Gatla had cut a deal from officials in the outgoing Donald Trump administration, suspending the sanctions for a year. The move has since then prompted three Democratic lawmakers, including the chair of the House Committee of Foreign Affairs, to write a letter to the Treasury Secretary saying the waiver upends US policy towards the Congo and calling for it to be reversed. These concerns are being raised as President Felix Tshisekedi appears to have wrested control of the National Assembly in Kinshasa away from his predecessor as Kabila's leverage and clout continues to wane. Gatla says the documents were forged. Asubo says Uganda should not be concerned of Afriland's footprint in the DRC as the subsidiary here is independent.
These banks operate as independent subsidiaries. So the subsidiary in Uganda is run independent of the subsidiary in the Democratic Republic of Congo. It does not translate that the misdeeds of a branch in another country will apply, of a subsidiary in another country will apply to the subsidiary in another, because the management is different, the rules in those countries are different, how those rules are enforced is different. As far as we are concerned, there are no money laundering concerns that have been associated with this particular bank.
The leaked records of alleged money laundering centered on Afriland Bank's branch in Kinshasa were made public by the campaign group, the Platform for the Protection of Whistleblowers in Africa, and other media outlets. Scrutiny of the documents on the company accounts at Afriland Bank, one of Central Africa's largest financial groups, and these latest allegations of money laundering made against Gatla's companies are likely to form part of the review of his case in Washington, D.C. The documents reveal how Gatla's Maki network operated below the radar to avoid detection of U.S. anti-money laundering restrictions and banks' compliance departments. A previously unknown company, which had ties to Gatla, received around a quarter of the Afriland branch's entire loans in early 2019, and several companies tied to alleged financiers of the Middle East militant group Hezbollah and North Korea's armaments program also held accounts at the branch, the evidence shows. Some of the evidence gathered by Navy Malala, one of the in-house auditors at Afriland Bank in Kinshasa, shows how a special intermediary account at the bank that was not tied to any individual, called the Disposition a Pair account, allowed companies in Dan Gatla's network to convert millions of US dollar banknotes into euros. The euros were then moved into accounts run by associates of Gatla or members of his immediate family. These methods appear designed to navigate United States sanctions, which prohibited Gatla from conducting bank wire transactions in dollars. The use of front companies could also allow him to avoid compliance officers at other banks, which can block transactions over corruption risks. Alain Mukonda, a Congolese businessman, was a key figure using the intermediary account in Kinshasa. Over 6 months, from January to July 2018, Mukonda made deposits of 10.5 million US dollars and 3.5 euros of cash into the account and withdrew 7.1 million US dollars and 6.3 million euros. Mukonda has denied operating on behalf of Gatla, yet is listed as the president of Ventura Development and personally handled the redomiciling of several of Gatla's companies.
Could try to blow up their cost, to reduce their profits, to reduce the tax. That is also money laundering. No, that's also illicit financial flow. Yeah, so they have all these high costs, and then for profits to look low, so that they pay less tax. All that. Companies overblowing the cost of something, or underrating the cost of something, so that they pay less tax. When, like if they're importing, let's say a car, the car is, even individuals do mispricing. They import a car, Ferrari, I bought it for $30,000, yet we know it's a car in the range of 100,000 going up. Of course, URA is trying to cure some of these things by having a price list.
Laundering is one case, but we also know cases of outright tax evasion. That's a concern of the Uganda Revenue Authority. There has also been a recent debate regarding trade-based illicit financial frauds, which have to do with trade misinvoicing. And when we talk about trade misinvoicing, it involves either under declaration of value, or even over declaration of the value of imports. How it works is I send you commodities worth 25 million US dollars, for instance. But when I'm invoicing you, I tell you that these are worth only 10 million US dollars when I'm invoicing you. I under declare. So what you do is that for you, the value of goods is 25. But I've given an invoice of 10. So when you reach the market value here, you sell the 25. So what means that now you keep the 15 and you send me back the 10. So I have kept the 15 laundered money, which I disguised as goods.
3 policy areas should be the central focus for the government. Eliminate the allowance and use of anonymous companies in the economy, reduce the ease and volumes of trade misinvoicing, and enforce anti-money laundering laws, particularly within the banking sector.